Has it been a good 2 days? Yes. I've only been here for 2 sessions and I'm already inspired and motivated and crying and, so I can't imagine the emotional roller coaster that you've been on for the past 2 days and all the things that you're, anxiously waiting to go back to your office to implement. But I also know that you're probably thinking, this lady is the only thing between me and the closing keynote so I can go home. Because I know I do conferences all the time and you get conference fatigue sometimes, right? So I only have about 15 minutes, that's the good news. So I won't be here very long. And that's good news because I love the topic that I'm going to be sharing with you today, and I could talk for hours about work. I love work. I love creating engaging cultures of work. So much so that I wrote a song about it. And I knew that you would probably have conference fatigue. You probably need to get your blood flowing. I know you just had your meditation exercise. But I'm going to get you up just for a minute so you'll have your blood flowing and you'll listen to me for the next 15 minutes. So let's see if I know how to work this. All right, everybody get up. Come on. Clap your hands. Have you heard the song by Salt and Pepper, Let's Talk About Sex? We're going to talk about sexual harassment later, but now we're going to talk about work, all right? Let's talk about work, baby. Let's talk about employees. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that may be when it comes to the work. Let's talk about work. Let's talk about work. Let's talk about work. Hey. All right. Thank you for indulging me there. All right, so that's what we're going to do. So who was here at this conference last year? So you probably saw me last year. I was the opening keynote. I went from one day to the next, one end of the spectrum to the next last year. And that was right on the heels of the Me Too and Time's Up movement. That awakened every single workplace for the past couple of years that it has been now. And we have looked at our landscape change across workplaces, and we're going to talk about, start out the conversation about how Me Too has disrupted organizations in a way, government, and how that we're in our future of work. We talk a lot about, the phrase how technology and AI is disrupting the future of work. You know who's really disrupting the future of work? Our employees, because the aftermath of Me Too and Time's Up has really awakened them and empowered them to demand better work cultures. So we've got to change the way that we are operating at this point. The faces on this slide, I put this slide together about a year ago. This is 100 faces of the Me Too and Time's Up movement. Since then, we get a new face probably almost every day, right? And it continues, and we're continuing to see more and more legislation throughout municipalities, throughout states, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But, so what's the aftermath? Well, increased media. I used to have to, as a labor and employment law attorney, I would wait, and even when I transitioned to HR, I would wait for something that I subscribed to send me all the court cases that had been handed down. What are the courts saying? What are the courts saying? I don't have to wait for that email anymore, because when I wake up and open Yahoo or any other page, it's right there in the headlines. I know what company is doing what, who's filed a discrimination lawsuit against whom. This morning, woke up, or yesterday morning, someone was just filed a suit for prayer discrimination at an organization, saying that her boss was making her pray, and when she wouldn't pray, she was fired. So those are the types of things that we are literally being fed to us and to our employees, and our employees are aware of that. But more importantly, I read an article the other day that in the New York Times, the word discrimination came up 18,000 times in 2018. 18,000. Guess how many times the word discrimination came up before Me Too and Time's Up? Not 18,000. About 4,000 or 5,000. So that shows how much the media now is covering discrimination. So what does that result in? Well, now employees are taking action on their own. And what we also learned from that is that our employees don't trust us a lot of times. When we ask, why did you wait so long to report? Why am I just now hearing about this? Right? Even the previous speaker talked about how she was, reluctant to talk about her disability to her organization. So there are apps out there that many employees are getting on. I'm not endorsing either one of these apps. These are just examples. And I think that there was a lunchtime discussion about one of these apps from one of the sponsors, Vault. There's locks out there, but these are applications and websites where employees are going because they don't trust our internal HR departments and the leaderships at the organizations. They're taking it upon amongst themselves to go to these apps and ask for help and guidance to help them navigate through certain situations. And I actually went in, created an account because I was just nosy to see what's being said there. And there are some pretty revealing things that are still happening, but employees are asking, what can I do? What can I do? And they're getting that guidance from HR professionals such as me. They're not practicing necessarily in an organization. They're getting it from labor and employment law attorneys. The Time's Up initiative also has a legal fund where they're helping employees to, take their employers to court. So the employees are empowering each other across the nation, not even just in the same organization. They're empowering each other through technology. And if they're not doing that, there were so many walkouts this year, or last year, 2018. We had workers at McDonald's walk out. We had workers at Google walk out, Comcast for sexual harassment in the workplace. So again, that was another way that employees are demonstrating to us, and they're letting us know they're taking the workplace back. They're taking the workplace back, and they're demanding better cultures and working environments. And they're not doing it through labor organizing like we used to see it done. They're doing it in other ways, being vocal, going to the media. And then the community is responding. When they're seeing this type of things in the media, they're saying, hey, go boycott that company or don't use that company because of their employment practices. We're seeing laws change. And this is what I'm most excited about. Because laws in the past did very little to change the workplace. We had ways to navigate around them. There were all kind of loopholes where you could still engage in unlawful conduct and get away with it. And so what we're seeing now is a change of that. Those loopholes that were discovered after the Me Too and Time's Up, or through the journey of Me Too and Time's Up, those loopholes are being closed. No more what I like to call take the pay and go away. You know what that means, right? I put in a complaint of some sort of harassment. The company does an investigation, and even if they corroborated the harassment, it's, oh, you've got to leave, here's your settlement agreement, and you can't talk about it, right? So what we saw during that journey of Me Too Time's Up, where people were breaking these agreements, or celebrities were helping them to pay off their company to share their stories. But now we've seen legislation throughout states and municipalities outlawing non-disclosure agreements. So what does that mean? That means that we no longer can have employees at our organization or leaders at our organization that are engaging in unlawful conduct, and we are able to pay our employees off through these NDAs. We're seeing forced arbitration agreements go away. Now you're able to go to court. A lot of organizations that had contract employees had forced arbitration clauses, and we are seeing courts and cities right now actually have legislation pending increasing the statute of limitations that you can file a complaint. That was something else that was revealed through the Me Too and Time's Up journey. Well, once I found out that the conduct I experienced was, discriminatory or unlawful, my 180 days at the federal level, which is only 6 months, had already passed. Or now that I know that everybody else is coming forward, I would love to come forward. I would love to hold my company accountable, but it happened 3 years ago, past the statute of limitations. So there is pending legislation out there right now where they're looking to extend the statute of limitations for harassment. So what has that done? That's caused employer panic. All of those Whether it's the increased media attention, the employee walkouts, the different legislation, employers are panicking. And believe me, I get calls every day. Either I don't know if my company is going to be the next one in the news. Perhaps I've kept somebody around that I should not have. Perhaps I paid someone off to go away. We have all these different rules now for training. Everything is disrupted now. So it's causing panic. And my response is, really, when I'm listening to people talk through the issues and they're looking at it from a legal, regulatory, and compliance view, I say, you're looking at the wrong thing. This type of behavior shouldn't happen at all, the unlawful behavior. It starts at a foundation. There are some root causes of it that if you address those root causes, you don't have to worry about the unlawfulness part of it. So let's look at some of these root causes, all right? Now, covering. The previous speaker talked about covering, how she hid her disability from her employer, right? Because she thought for some reason maybe I won't move up the ranks. And a lot of people with disabilities cover their disabilities, but there are other types of covering that happens as well. Maybe I'm covering my socioeconomic status, that I grew up in poverty. Maybe I'm covering the fact that I've had a bankruptcy. Maybe I'm covering the fact that I was a single mother at one time, or that I'm going through a divorce, or, it's so many things that people cover in the workplace because they don't have a sense of belonging or a feeling of belonging. And they feel the need to adhere to cultural norms. I always ask, when I'm doing a cultural assessment, one of the questions that I always ask employees is, describe a typical leader at this organization. And I'm very curious to see how that comes back, because if they start describing physical characteristics, I know there's an issue there. If they say, oh, they're usually men, or they're usually under the age of this, I know, okay, there's a certain homogeneous environment at this organization amongst the leadership ranks. Now, if they start talking about behavior, oh, our leaders are compassionate, they have empathy, they're motivational, then I'll say, okay, you're on the right path of having an engaging culture. New York City just last week passed a law that for 2 seconds, I was so excited about. It lasted literally and I see my New York people like, yep, I know what you're talking about. They passed a law that you can't discriminate against people because of their hair. Okay? Now I want you to think about what that means. That means that the workplace was discriminating against people because of the way that their hair came out of their head. And we had to pass a law to stop them from doing that. So I was one of the victims of not having this hair, policy in place. Because for years, I felt as if, even though no one necessarily told me so, I felt for years I need to fry my hair as straight as I can get it to fit in with the cultural norms. And I didn't feel as if I would be accepted if I wore my hair the way it came out of my scalp, like this, big old hair. And it's a rainy day too, so it's gonna get bigger as I stand here, okay? But when you think about that, I was so happy I saw it, oh, this is great. And then it lasted for 2 seconds, I'm like, but wait a minute, did we really have to pass a law to tell organizational leaders to let people just be themselves? And it's not just hair, it's body shape. There's a lot of fat shaming that goes on in organizations. I recently saw a study of the average rate of a senior leader in the for-profit sector. They did a study on it, and it showed that if you're overweight, you're typically not gonna make it to the C-suite. Right? So what does that tell me? That means that if I'm at work and I feel that I can't be my authentic self, I can't bring my full self, I have to assimilate to the cultural norms. What happens then? How long can I keep that up? Right? In fact, I am experiencing what you call the imposter syndrome. And I'm worried every day, will I be found out? Will I be found out? Will they really know who I am? And so when I'm worrying about that, can I produce my best work? Can I give the organization everything I have? No. So that's one of the root causes covering, and it's so much more to that conversation. Next, microaggressions. Everybody heard that word, microaggressions? I think now we call them micro inequities. And what I have discovered, looking at organizational cultures through all these years, is that hostile work environments usually start with microaggressions, those subtle jabs that people like to give each other, right? So when I was looking at a common microaggression, I didn't realize what a microaggression was, 20-something years ago when I first got in the workplace, until I started reading the definition. What is this microaggression I keep hearing about? So before I went to law school, I worked at a law firm. I'm from LA, Lower Alabama, all right? And I love the looks that I get. That is my favorite. I get you every time. Okay, so I'm in Alabama, and I worked at this law firm. It had about 100 attorneys there. 98 of them were women. I'm sorry. Whoa, I wish. No, 98 of them were white males. It was one black attorney, one female attorney, and a lot of support staff that were all women, every single legal secretary, every single paralegal. I was in HR, and there was one other African-American female in accounting. And my last day before leaving for law school, that other African-American female came into my office and says, "I want to tell you something." She goes, "You won't believe it. I walked into one of our senior partner's office, and when she walked in, he tells her, 'Good luck in law school.'" And she goes, "Oh, no, you're confused. I'm not going to law school. Natasha is." And he looks at her and says, "Oh, so who are you?" She had worked there for 5 years. I had worked there for 3 years. But the two black girls were the same person in his eyes. That's a microaggression. And I found that as I go into organizations and hear stories of employees, that actually happens quite often when you are one of a couple of minorities within that organization. So much so that two Asian ladies shared with me that they were constantly getting mixed up, their names. And people were doing, lots of people throughout the organization. I think one's name was Kim, one was Jamie. They were calling each other's name to the point where one time HR got their pay stubs mixed up and left the wrong pay stub at the wrong desk. And they were like, enough already. Again, those microaggressions, though, they can go in that upward spiral towards creating a hostile work environment. But most of the time, people are unaware that what they're saying is hurtful, is disrespectful. We walk around a lot of times in what I like to call default mode, right? Meaning that we're just walking around there and being purposeful and intentional in our behavior, in our conduct, how we communicate with each other. We're not aware of each other's differences, just no awareness whatsoever. And more importantly, we speak before we think. But that can be hurtful and harmful to the people around us and eventually lead to those workplaces that are hostile for people. Cultural competency, or like I like to call it, cultural incompetency, is usually the problem. As organizations grow and expand and become global, and we're doing it so rapidly, and of course, if you're expanding your organization even nationally, you're going to get a wider range of people within your organization. Hopefully, you're getting a wider range of people. But what we're doing, we're inviting all of these different people from different backgrounds, different experiences, different education levels, different countries, but we're not preparing our organization for that representation. And it's not until someone from a different culture or from a different background comes into your organization and an event happens, someone says a microaggression or something like that, that we say, oh, maybe we need to do some diversity training. At that point, it's too late. You've already offended the employee, right? And we have seen in a lot of sectors, like in tech, where they're saying we're recruiting this diverse workforce, we're recruiting, but we can't keep them. That's because you really haven't prepared your organization for those differences. A lot of times when we think about culture, we think about, cross-border cultures. We think about employees coming from different countries, but culture has so much definition to it, so many differences. Like I said, I grew up in Alabama. My daughter is a New Yorker. And I didn't realize how much in our own household there was so much cultural differences, right? So for instance, she loves bagels. I like biscuits, right? Big cultural difference there. But when it really dawned upon me was one time we were down south one summer, a couple of summers ago, had the windows down, it's warm. She goes, "Mom, what's that smell?" And I go, "What smell?" "That smell." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And then it dawned on me, oh, that's fresh cut grass. My poor Bronx raised and fed daughter had never awakened to someone cutting their lawn, never smelled the grass. It made me think, like, what a difference in our culture within my own household. So imagine in the workplace how that shows up. I know my time is running up. I knew 15 minutes was not going to work for me. And then I knew it. Ask my husband, there's no way I'm talking about anything for only 15 minutes. All right. So then we have unconscious bias, and we all know what that is. That we all have it. But the problem is when we start our decision-making process with unconscious bias in mind. Right? Someone walks in for an interview, we relate to them, right? "Oh, you look just like me, and we went to the same school, and you love football, I love football, and I'm not really paying attention to your resume. You're not as qualified as I want you to be, but because you remind me of myself, I'm gonna hire you based on your potential, because if I made it, so can you." Whereas someone that's not like me walks in, and you've got to show your proven accomplishments. And then we have the untouchables, right? Those people that are so highly regarded and valued and bring, the big bucks into the organization, the rainmaker, the skilled surgeon, and we're not holding them to the same level of accountability that we're holding others. Those are the root causes. So what can you do? I'll say this quickly. I'm sorry. You have my number. You have my cards. Just come by to see me. We'll jump on a call and finish this up. Do a cultural assessment. And I'm not talking about an employee engagement assessment. That's way different. A cultural assessment, which is going to get a feeling of the sense of belonging that each of your employees have at that organization. Just like the previous speaker, what are you covering? Are you covering a disability? Do you feel you can come and be your authentic self? Questions like that gets to the root cause of what's in your culture, and develop your actions around that. Right? Looking at your processes, your policies, and not being so policy driven when it gets to accountability. I think sometimes we hold our senior leaders accountable to too many quantifiable measures. We need to be holding them accountable to their behavior. How civil are they? How respectful are they? How aware are they of the people in their organization? Right? Those are the 3 steps of what I like to call the AAA approach. And when we think about the employee life cycle, these are all of the touch points where you should be looking for unconscious bias, microaggressions. Do people have the same access to promotion? What's your rate of promotion? What do your benefits look like? Just like our previous speaker talked about. Could you do something from that perspective to help? And when you look at all of that and really dig deep into each one of these touch points, your workforce is then enlightened. Right? You have a more engaging, inclusive environment where everyone wants to come. We don't want them on Glassdoor leaving nasty comments, because that's where employees are looking first before they even come for the interview. They're doing their own assessment. What's the culture there now? I want to know before I walk in the door, right? You want to keep this, engaging workplace where everybody has a sense of belonging, and it's more than avoiding a lawsuit. It's the right thing to do. I partner with 4A's. We have a certification called the Workforce Enlightenment Certification. We talk about race relations in the workplace. We talk about gender issues and gender dynamics. And then I come in on the 3rd day and talk about prevention and intervention of harassment and discrimination. So please reach out to 4A's if you're interested in that. Otherwise, this is my contact information. Tweet me, IG me. I'm old, I don't know what all this stuff means. Facebook me, or just write me a good old-fashioned letter, all right? Thank you so much. I don't know if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.